Hey there, designers, and welcome to the Huddle, where we dive deep into the world of UX and help you take your skills to the next level. I'm Meg.
I'm Mel.
And I'm Cam, and we're your hosts.
Today we'll be diving deep into our own personal journey and what it looks like to craft your story as a UX designer. Often this is your first differentiator when you enter into the industry, and something that we are definitely on our own journey in writing ourselves. So why don't you kick us off, Mel? Tell us about your story.
Sure, I'd love to. So my name's Mel. I'm a UX designer based in Toronto, and I spent 4 years in university studying illustration because I love drawing. I've been drawing since I was a little kid, and illustration was something I would love to do. That's why I chose illustration for university. And after getting a degree, I pivoted into graphic design because reality hits. I need to find a job, but illustration is more of a lifelong practice for me. And that's why I started to do graphic design after graduate university. And while I was working in the graphic design industry, I discovered UI UX, which for me is just makes sense. I love the logic of considering every design decision. And I would love to, really participate in the decision making of the entire design process. And that's the reason why I decided to do UX. And it is also where I met Meg and Cam. We went to the same boot camp together, and here we are today working on a UX podcast.
Totally. I think that what you said there about problem solving is definitely what brings a lot of us to this profession. Similar story in your mind, Cam?
Yeah. So I think that my story is, kind of unique, as many of ours are. I spent my 20s working in the bicycle industry. So working with people as much as working with my hands, and problem solving is something that I think I enjoy. It's a puzzle. Whether it's a human problem or a physical, mechanical problem, I think that I naturally am good at both of those things. So I think it's kind of left and right brain for me. And that's what I like about UX is it's leveraging both of those skills that I already have. So I met a UX designer in the last year, and I basically didn't understand what working in tech was. I thought everyone in tech is proficient in those languages like Python and HTML. And I thought that a UX designer would be coding or writing, the language of a program. So I understood a little bit more, did my own research, and interviewed 2 UX designers that I had in my network. And they kind of pointed out that I'm already doing a lot of the problem solving that, the job entails. And they were impressed with the research that I had done to come to those conversations with a little bit more understanding of what it was so that I wasn't wasting their time. And so they've continued to be good mentors to me. And I think that asking for help is a thing that I hear from a lot of senior designers. So strongly encourage for anybody that is starting this process, find somebody in your network, talk to somebody that knows more than you. They're more than happy to share, especially if you respect their time.
Yeah, I think that mentorship thing will definitely be something we'll need to dive into deeper in future episodes, for sure. But I think that one of the things that really stood out to me right there was that whole left brain, right brain thing. Really similar story in my mind, but just to give you guys a little brief on how I came into this world. So I started in the world of journalism. That's what I did my undergraduate in. I came to that because I had a really deep love for art and writing. I read a lot of books growing up, and I loved to study the world and people. And that brought me into the wonderful world of journalism and eventually into the world of policy, where all I wanted to do was make a difference in the world and figure out how I can take everyday people's problems and find solutions for those that we can implement at a federal level. Then the election happened and my member of parliament actually didn't get reelected. So I had a little bit of a pivot in my career at that point. I had an opportunity to either go back to the Hill or look at some other avenues. And I decided, after speaking to some friends who worked at Lululemon, to start my journey in e-commerce. So that I arrived at with a fitness for health and fitness, and ended up working there until the pandemic hit. And that obviously thrust the whole world into a bit of a transition, trying to reimagine what life would look like then. And for a lot of people, it was quite literally a transition for their careers, for what they wanted to do with their lives. And I also embarked on that journey at that time. I was offered an opportunity to go and work for Lululemon online. So I took that opportunity while they were also scaling their business over 200% to meet the needs of the consumers during that time. And they needed people who understood the business to be subject matter experts. And those people, including myself, got to be in the rooms with designers and developers. And so that was how I really got to learn about the world of UX. And from that learning, it was like this click in my mind that I realized that all of my previous experience, there was always something missing until I came to UX and realized this was a culmination of all of the things that I loved from all my previous jobs that just happened to be under one title. And what a wonderful coincidence. But I think that happens for so many people in this industry.
Yeah, and I'm curious, Meg, like when you were on those teams and you're working with devs and designers, what are your perceptions of the differences, and what did you see in the day of a designer that kind of made you steer towards that instead of maybe development or, yeah?
Definitely. I think that we could do a whole episode on the nuances and differences between designers and developers. Not to put anyone in buckets, but I would say that for me, it was really about, one, the user being at the center of it. I think that developers, they're builders often. You give them a blueprint, you give them a roadmap, and they can build to an ability that I don't personally think I have. I don't personally describe myself as a builder. I think that I'm a problem solver, which is what really put me in the UX bucket, because for me, even my past experience, it was always about figuring out at the heart of it the user and the person, whether it was writing a story about a community or trying to figure out policy to help a community. It was always about that person at the center of it. And I think it's the human aspect of UX design that is often what draws us to it, as opposed to maybe front end or back end development. That is a lot more of that, that building. Yeah.
That's a great answer.
I'm curious though, for both of you, what would you say is your unique background that defines you as your own unique designer?
Yeah, for me, because I come from an art and design background, like I've been already working in the design industry before UX, so I would say definitely I'm more comfortable like working within the design system, working within the design thinking, and a lot of like design related theories and mindsets. And well, on one hand, I'm definitely one of those designers who would push every pixel perfect. I really value the visual part of the design because I was doing graphic design before. And another thing I want to mention, like in my case, is that because I also do art on the other hand. So for me, it's like a combination of being logic, think about design, think about like scientific things, think about research, being rational, but like also really empathize with my users to use that feeling to feel the design, to, really pick up a color that brings out the feeling of the product, to really think about how my users would think in certain situations. So yeah, for me, it's definitely the combination of art and design that differentiates me from a lot of other designers. I think that's also like a common traits happen within like a lot of people who are pivoting to UX from more of art and design background. Yeah, I think that's my case.
I definitely see the fine art influence in your design. I think that anyone who I know, and I'll speak for myself definitely on this, who's seen your designs knows how visually beautiful they are.
Thank you. But like also really always think about accessibility.
Absolutely.
Always create something that's visually pleasing, but like also accessible to all the users.
Yeah, and my perspective on your designs are like they're very thoughtful. Like you're doing something that meets your own needs as an artist, but you're also making something accessible, usable, and yeah, I mean, I've looked up to you for a minute. To answer your question, Meg, I think that my experience over the years, like either owning a small business or running them with ownership pretty closely, and also being a fan of a lot of like creative projects like brands, and just kind of like the DIY punk upbringing that I had in my, kind of formative teenage years, seeing the opportunities to like create something out of nothing and to service the needs of somebody that is either somebody you identify with or you don't. So when we run a bike shop, we have, I would say, like, if you're going to kind of make personas, there's easily 3 really like overarching ones. I won't get into it, but you could subdivide those into like 80 different users. And how do you make an experience that doesn't alienate one but empowers another? It's a really difficult thing, but the business impact of projects, designs, and initiatives that you kind of implement, I get a lot of satisfaction out of that. Because either you're creating opportunity for yourself for advancement or employment for yourself. And that security and that connection between a design or a project and its actual impact is something that I really enjoy. So, working at a smaller company and actually being able to like take the reins of something and see impact a little bit quicker than maybe a big corporation. Having never worked in big corporations, like I don't really know if that's going to be part of that experience. I'm not afraid to try it, but I really enjoy like seeing the way something actually impacts a user or yourself. Like whether you're putting together something for your coworker to be able to better retrieve something, whether it's like an Excel spreadsheet with everything that one's going to need when they need to look and find information. So like the information architecture of your business is just as relevant as the way in which you organize a website. So it extends to everything. And I think that impact is something that we'll definitely get into, like the business impact and articulating design decisions to a stakeholder that isn't going to come from a design language background, but they're going to have the business acumen that's going to be greater than ours. So I'm looking forward to that episode. I think that's something we should definitely cover. I think that's something I've heard in another podcast, and I would love to reference and build upon those ideas. But yeah, I think that's my background. What about yours?
Totally. So one of the big things that jumped out at me there is big corporations. I've absolutely had my fair share of big corporations, and if it's not too silly to compare the federal government to a large corporation, managing
they're a business.
millions and millions of Canadians. But yeah, I think it's that point about understanding how to make it all balanced, understanding how to take into account my end user, whether that's a constituent or my reader or the guests that I'm, help creating a system for in Lululemon, it's about figuring out what are their needs and also what are the needs of and the goals of the business I'm working for. What is the party's mandate? What is my, newspapers stances on like objectivity? How do I balance that also with the needs of my reader? How do I balance the needs of the guests of Lululemon also with the needs of the greater business? And I think that balancing act is something that I've had to manage throughout my whole career. And I think that is really one of the unique things that has really helped me with, at the very least, articulating and selling my design decisions, because I understand from day one that balancing act is always something that you're going to need to ensure is present in your work, or else you miss a large part of the process.
And what we're talking about, I think, is you're balancing the empathy for the user, or that's how you understand the user, is through empathy, and then the actual impact of the project.
Well, and then the pragmatic business goals, because at the end of the day, it's business. How are you going to explain the ROI for a business if you're not taking into account their needs in the first place, and if you don't understand their goals in the first place and where they want to be in 5, 10, 20 years?
Yeah, it's hard to articulate sometimes, like the ROI on making your users happy. Sometimes there's not an immediate return. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that we will probably dig into is, selling stakeholders on the importance of UX. I've got a lot of thoughts on that.
I think that it's definitely one of the biggest learning curves for a lot of juniors. I know that even with my experience from other industries, it's still something that I am growing at and figuring out how to do. And I know that from conversations with senior designers too, that never really stops. I think that we're all always developing our skills for that, almost as much as, if not more than, our actual pixel-pushing designed tools and our user research and all of our other, rich UX skills. I think that articulation of design and understanding stakeholder relationships and cross-functional relationships is, a journey for us all.
Yeah, it never ends.
Absolutely.
Which is exciting. It's exciting.
I would agree with that for sure. Who, I guess then, would you both say influences? Who or what actually influences your design?
I'm gonna say everything. The more precise answer would be like, as a creative, I find inspirations from a lot of things, like even tiniest things in life. For example, recently I'm working on a few visual design projects, like personal projects, and I got inspiration from a random sentence that I had in my head, which is losing faith in humanity since 1998. And taken from that, I started to think, how can I put my my own interpretation of a person I know in my life into one sentence and into one visual design. And I started to really dig into that idea. I've been creating design pieces for everyone I know, including Meg and Kim. So that's really how I find inspirations, like literally from everything. Because I think for me, I really see this world in my life from my own perspective. I find a lot of things are actually really interesting. I find human beings are fascinating to study, which is another reason why I chose UX. Because after all, we're here to study human. We're here to design for them. And other than that, I also find inspirations from a lot of people like around me, either my friends or other great designers. I often find especially for people like within this industry, like other UX designers who are who are like role model for me, like who are like someone I look up to, and they kind of just give me the courage and the direction of where I wanted to grow and to, really get better as a professional. So yeah, random things and professionals within the industry. That's my answer.
Yeah, I mean, I think that whenever I think of you, I always think of the creative brain and how a creator works and is always creating. I think that with your creativity, a lot of it has come from you just creating constantly and playing within realms of creativity. And I think that that is why you are such a strong designer as well.
Thank you. Yeah, on that note, it's actually like, because I'm a huge nerd about storytelling. Like for me, whether I was working in illustration or graphic design or any other random design projects I'm working on, it's always about telling a story. Either it's tell my own story or the people around me, or, just anything. Maybe the story of the city I live in, or maybe the story of the weather.
Mm-hmm.
It's always about like telling and communicating an idea to the others.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that's why I just won't stop creating, because I want to share my own voice. I want to communicate with the others.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Just to plug your award-winning zine.
Let's keep it low key.
What about yourself, Cam?
Yeah, I mean, I thought about this question after, we kind of talked about this is what we're going to be prepped with. And I think that I also find inspiration in kind of unlikely places. So I have a lot of feelings about like spaces and the way in which a space makes you feel. Like I feel like being in a workplace should feel like productive. It should feel relaxing to be walking through the forest. A home should feel relaxing and equal parts productive. And it should be able to kind of switch and change gears. So products should leave you with those feelings too. Whether it's accessibility or maybe, there's some urgency to some task that you need to do and it needs to be efficient. We get frustrated when we're waiting for things. And that's kind of just a really overarching idea that I have about designs. But where I take inspiration from beyond just everyday life, designers that don't want to be defined by one discipline. Virgil Abloh is like a designer that I'm new to. He's passed away in the last year. But discovering his work and understanding how many things he took on under a brand that wasn't necessarily going to be doing like multimedia. Dieter Rams, his approach to industrial design and furniture design is something that I think is often referenced in like the history of UX and understanding what design thinking is and the principles of design, which I think we're going to get into in another episode. But yeah, like I listen to a lot of music. I used to play music, and the intention that artists bring to their craft is the same thing that I see in common with design. And I think, Mel is, maybe I'm wrong in saying this, but maybe artist first, and then design is something that you are wearing really well, but still not like ditching your identity as an artist. I think you like wear these different hats in different situations. And then as a designer, you're not ever forgetting what you're trained in and have built as a muscle. And I think that you wear both of those hats very well. And now they're kind of the same. And so, it's my very long-winded way of saying Mel's great. She's really talented. But yeah, like that's something that I strive for. And I think that I've lost a lot of my different artistic muscles over the years, but like photography is something that, you're arranging elements and it's very similar in terms of the composition of, negative space and letting certain elements breathe in your UI. And I think that that's something that I'm connecting those dots. And I think that I understood what UX was and kind of said like, I think I understand like the aesthetics. I think I'm going to come at that and learn these tools, and I'll be able to like know that that looks close to what I want or what's in my head, and I'll just have to like learn how to do that. But
Yeah, for listeners that don't know Cam, you'll know that I'm nodding my head right now because Cam really has an eye for grids and spacing and alignment, negative spacing. I in fact, I think that he was usually one of the first person that I would bring my design to if I wanted someone to really let me know where the alignment might be off, where the grids, where the negative space is not jiving, because he really does have an eye from that. And I think that that is your photography trained eye.
I really appreciate that. I feel like it's something that reapplying that to your UI is, you can almost go too far down the rabbit hole. We in our program learned the 8-point grid, and then I proceeded to make every padding, every bit of spacing a multiple of 8, and it just like it can spiral out of control. And then there's obviously these exceptions to the rules, but it is so fun to like kind of figure out that puzzle of like, this can work. I know it can. Let's make it look good. And yeah, it's very enjoyable to use a product where that is clearly the like intention that a designer took. So I would love to be able to bring more of that, to my designs and help everyone figure it out.
Totally. So you both touched on something that deeply inspires me too, and that's everything. I think that, Don Norman was right for a reason. We are inspired by everyday things. We're inspired by the things around us. And I think often what sets off a really, truly innovative product is when we borrow from other industries, when we borrow from things that we notice in the world, from things we hear from people in normal conversations. Oftentimes in journalism, the best stories I found were just in regular, everyday conversations. Oftentimes in design, it's the exact same. It's an idea that just comes out of a conversation, an idea that comes out of studying psychology, studying the world, studying other industries that have innovative solutions for a problem that are similar, but maybe just not tested in that industry. I think, in that way, I'm deeply inspired by the world and by people. And I mean, ultimately, that is what we're designing for. So,
couldn't agree more.
So, I guess with that, let's get a little aspirational for a second. What are your goals? How do you hope to contribute to the future of design?
Wow, nice question. To be honest, I actually never seriously thought about that question before. Because for me, being creative, designing create something that's like already part of my life, a part of my identity. I guess for me, I want to keep doing that. And I want to create things that I'm proud of, I feel good doing, but also has a value to someone. It doesn't have to be the entire world, or you cannot design for everyone, but I hope what I create can resonate with certain amount of people, with some people, and bring them the joy I had while creating, to really communicate that positive feeling through it.
Totally. And I think that you touched on something really valid, which is, I don't think that people always have an answer to that question and know exactly where they want to go with design and for their whole future. I think that that can be a really daunting place to try to commit to, especially as a junior designer, maybe not knowing all of the different ways that you can take your design and where that might take you. Especially being pretty new to the world of UX design specifically and still trying to grow ourselves. I think it's completely valid to not necessarily know exactly what you want to do with it until the end of time, but just to keep designing and growing with that, I think is ultimately a really good goal in and of itself.
Yeah, like I'm sure like maybe in a couple months, a couple years, I'll have a different but like more solid answer to that question. But yeah,
Well, here's to that journey for you.
thank you.
What about yourself, Cam?
Yeah, I think that that's going to be a moving target through our whole careers. One of my most respected mentors, a woman named Zainab, she's so talented. She's so nice. She's so modest. Her journey, I'd love to have her on the podcast eventually. But to give you a quick overview and what she told me in our early conversations about UX, she came from an industrial design background, and she realized that she was designing things that were going to end up in a landfill and were disposable. So I think that that perspective of like, what is the impact of my work going to be? And I would like it to be more positive. Things that get thrown away still need designing. So there's no wrong answer to that. And her perspective was more that I think that she wanted to consider what her impact was on a more like regular basis. And so the way I think about it is I want to be able to actually like see the impact of my designs for myself. And that won't always be possible, and that's fine. But if I'm going to work for companies, I want them to be in line with my ethics. So I think that that's one of my goals for kind of the earlier stages of my career. I think that we're all going to be, kind of having very different aspirations of who we will work for or what we will design if we're going to be working for ourselves as we grow as designers. But through those early years, I think that my goal is to think about the impact that I'm going to have on the world and not having huge aspirations, but just keeping an eye on, is it positive? Is it a net positive? Is it at least net neutral? I think that we may be tempted, like many designers, to work for, Shell or something like that. I'm sure they have designers on staff. And big corporations that have a negative impact on the environment is something that I'm not going to judge those people, but I won't choose that for myself. And who knows, maybe I will become an evil UX designer in many years and I'll be tempted by money as the world gets so expensive. But I think that I will be constantly considering that. And I think that that's maybe where my head's at early years. And that moving target, like I said, it will change. It'll change, as Mel kind of noted, month to month, year to year. But I'm curious to know what you think, your goals are, Meg.
Well, for starters, here's to hoping we don't lose a good one to the dark side. I think what you touched on is so important is understanding your impact and understanding how your design will impact the future and future generations. I think that truly the designs that changed the world are the ones that call to me the most. That being said, I'm not going to say that I'm going to be the liberator or the innovator of our generation. One can dream, but I think that for me, my goal is to really feel that connection with my design instead of just designing for the paycheck. My goal is to leave behind me a career that was filled with designs that I'm proud of, that I can look back on and see how they made people's lives better and how they continue to make people's lives better and how they inspire other designs that then make people's lives better. I'm really drawn to how collaborative the tech space is and how many products are built just by the work of dozens of different people over the span of decades to get to truly amazing products that we have today, just because of a small piece of the puzzle that someone made at some point in time. So that I don't think that I'm going to change the world, but I hope that I'm able to design things that help others change the world.
I love that. That's a great answer.
Yeah, I can see you change the world. I believe in you.
No pressure or anything.
I won't. But I'm sure I'm really excited to see what we'll create in a few years or maybe just in a few months.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited as well. I think that the journey ahead is going to be a great one. So on that note, thank you both for sharing your stories.
Thank you too, Meg.
Appreciate it. And thank you, listeners. That will be all for the Huddle. Please join us next time.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to Huddle. We appreciate your support and hope you enjoyed this episode. If you'd like to hear more, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to watch along, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. If you're feeling generous, please leave us a review and rating on your favorite platform. Your feedback helps us improve our content and reach more people. Until next time, keep learning, growing, and exploring. Today's show was produced by Meg, Mel, and Cam, with help from Meg, Mel, and Cam. Editing from Cam, music from Half Cool. I'm Meg. Thanks for joining the Huddle.